and Charles in the States. So, okay, with that, Charles Jennings, we're now going to hand it over to you for a 13-minute opening statement. I will let the audience know that I am all caught up on questions. Excellent questions so far coming in, all very on topic. And so welcome to the debate all. If you have a question, make sure to tag me. Okay, Charles Jennings, whenever you're ready, if you need to share screen, let me know. And just make sure to unmute yourself. You've got 13 minutes. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm going to skip the introduction, but I do show my appreciation to Pastor First for taking his time out. And I'm going to do the best I can. This is my first debate on this subject. And so have a little patience with me. And like I told you before we began, I haven't read all of your book yet. But right now, this is more of a fact-finding mission. I look forward to future debates with you. So, and I think our discussion will be enlightening and fruitful. Okay, so the topic is replacement theology biblical. I don't like the term replacement theology, but that's what we have for now. I already gave those disclaimers. So this is the overall structure of my opening. I'm going to talk about our positions in general. I'm going to talk about replacement theology and questions you can ask about it to be thinking for yourself. I'm going to talk about 3 types of premillennialism and introduce that. I'm going to talk about sociological distinctions versus soteriological distinctions and questions you can ask about that. I'm going to talk a little bit about Pastor First's book structure. I prefer the thesis would have been put up forward, but I understand that it wasn't written for me, and so he focuses more on history of doctrine, 1800s forward, that type of thing. I'm going to focus on the first few chapters of his book, and what I did was I went through all the scriptures and I made observation sheets, and I primarily used the King James. But keep in mind that I'm fuzzy on Pastor First's position in a lot of areas, okay? And as I said, I expect future discussions and debates. So basically what you're about to see is about 100 slides compressed down to maybe, say, 19. Okay, so Pastor Mass First says the church has no ending point. I say, yes, it does. Pastor First says that the wife and the bride distinction does not exist in the Bible. I say, yes, it does. He believes that there's no distinctions in the church. I say, yes, there is. He believes that there's no future regathering to Israel. I say, yes, there is. He says Christ and the church are the seed. And I agree, but we differ on the implications and possibly the interpretation of that. He believes that the land promises were fulfilled historically. And I would argue that they're not complete fulfillment. So my question to be thinking about for right now is, Pastor First, do you believe all covenants are fulfilled? Because I think about the Abrahamic and the sub-covenants that they have not been fulfilled. Okay, so what I did was the scriptures that I ran through, I looked at the categories of those that were listed and went through them, and that's how I made those yes and no things at the beginning. So my position is I'm a premillennial dispensationalist that believes salvation has always been by grace through faith. Israel will become spiritually saved during the tribulation by believing in Jesus as a Messiah. Now we're talking about the remnant, the national salvation that occurs at that time. Individual Jews get saved all the time. Individual Israelites get saved all the time. This is what I had sent to Pastor First through Donnie to be able to know my position. So as we're talking about replacement theology, some prefer the term supersessionism because they believe that the claim is that Israel has been superseded. Others like the term fulfillment theology. But here's some of the questions to be thinking about. Does God have a future for Israel? Regardless of what position you're evaluating, what does that question mean? It's kind of vague, but it gets you started. Is this future hope beyond spiritual salvation? Okay. Is the theocratic nation going to be restored? And by theocratic nation, I'm talking about from the time of the giving of the law to Moses, the Joshua, the judges, up to the kings, and all of that. Is there going to be a kingdom that is similar to David and Solomon, except a righteous ruler, sinless, who's God ruling? Will Jesus Christ reign on earth for 1,000 years? Okay. So one thing I don't know about Pastor First, if he's premillennialist. He sounds premillennialist in certain areas, but I think he has a different view than I'm familiar with. And so the question that people should be asking is, when we see the term premillennialist, is will Jesus come back before the Messianic millennial kingdom is established, or will he come back after? I say before. So there's a couple categories that we could talk about when we're talking about premillennialism. Some believe in historical premillennialism, and that's just a nice way to say that a person is premillennial, but they don't believe in the pre-trib rapture because they argue that the pre-trib rapture is not historical. Then there's covenantal premillennialism. This is the view that basically just hangs on Revelations 20 about the, kilos, the word kilo that's repeated 1,000 years. And it's called covenantal because it takes the covenant theology system behind it. Then you have dispensational premillennialism. This is the idea that the Abrahamic covenant and its sub-covenants necessitate that the theocracy will be restored. Okay, this is very important. This is one of my distinctions that I'm trying to articulate within Free Grace. I'm a seminary student. This is the closest thing I got to peer review in addition to my papers being graded. So this is my assertion. The kingdom, the covenants, and dispensations are all sociological categories. They're not soteriological ones. In other words, these relate to groups and group regulation. Okay, my undergraduate's in sociology. So not soteriological means we're not talking about spiritual salvation distinctions when we're talking about these categories of kingdom, dispensations, and covenants. Spiritual salvation existed before Israel did, or even the body of Christ did. And so the distinction cannot be at the level of spiritual salvation. So these groups are not distinct concerning spiritual salvation. So in that sense, you can say there's one people of God. If spiritual salvation did not distinguish them before, this spiritual salvation does not fulfill those other categories of distinction. So I believe that there's got to be some other mechanism besides arguing for spiritual salvation. And I think Pastor First does have a mechanism for that, an explanation. This requires that a fulfillment in the temporal realm must occur at some point. And these questions I put for the audience. Pastor First, I think, has made his position clear on this. I'll get some more nuance in this. But these are questions to ask if it requires a temporal realm fulfillment. Was it after Moses died and Joshua led them in? Was it during the reign of Solomon? Was it completed by Christ at his first coming? And then this all comes down to understanding what was the original promise. And then the further question is, what do you do with the land promise that's within that? And then the question is, if you're going to argue for Christ, how did Christ fulfill that land promise? Or will he fulfill it in the kingdom? See, some people have there's some aspects are fulfilled now, but there's future aspects. And the reason that's important is because when we're talking about this, a lot of times we use the language of this is a fulfillment of prophecy, but that language is too loose. We could probably say it's a partial fulfillment, but we can't say it's the ultimate fulfillment if we could point to other fulfillments after that initial fulfillment. And there's even more nuanced language, and we can go into that. But this is Pastor First's book. I do have it on Kindle. And so what I did to try to orient myself, when I first got the book, I first saw David Press's debate with him. I bought the book and started reading it. But as far as studying it, I didn't start studying it to the debate. But what I did was I went through and I looked at the structure of the book. I counted up the pages to get an idea about emphasis. This is not a foolproof idea. This is just to orient me. And I see that he spent most of his book focusing on addressing his audience, Americans, right? And all of that. Then the second, and then explaining the Judeo-Christian thing. His thesis of the book, most tied to the title of the book, is who is the original Israel, okay? 21 pages to spend on that. I'm going to be focusing on the first chapter 1 and chapter 2, not the part about Schofield and history and all that, but how he understands the verses that are brought up, okay? So I basically evaluated each chapter by what scriptures were explicitly said and what was the argument associated with that. Right. So here's some passages right here that relate to the land promises and stuff. We can talk about that. I'll go ahead and throw them forward, but I want you to see that I initially went through all the passages in order and wrote my answers in order like that. But because the land stuff is the most important in this debate, I believe, let's talk about it. So Pastor First talks about that the promised land is from the Nile River to the Euphrates River. He believes that that is fulfilled by mentioning other passages and everything. Now, there's going to be issues about this that have been brought up in preceding debates, but the passage that he brings up later on is going to say the border of Egypt. It doesn't say the river, okay? And there's an issue about which river it is and things like that, and we can get into that. Now, he brings up the passage it's in 12 and 15 where it says that God is giving it to thy seed. And then, but what about Genesis 17 where it's talking about that this will be everlasting? Now, I did hear Pastor First talk about everlasting refers to the fact that Israel's going to get resurrected and this is why I believe he's premillennial, because he seems to say that Israel is going to be resurrected. And okay, so then you do believe that the prophecy is going to be fulfilled, but you believe it's going to be fulfilled by believers that died and they get resurrected at that time, that are going to actually be the literal seed of Israel, the physical seed of Israel. Now, I understand that he makes a distinction between the southern tribes and the northern tribes, and he believes that the northern tribe being that is the Gentiles. And so the idea being is he'll use the passage about Ephraim being a multitude of nations, and he'll make the argument that the Gentiles are really the Jews interdispersed or whatever. I'm still not fully clear on that, but this is what I do know. The word nation at the time that the King James Bible could refer to the whole in a broad sense or even a subset. And he appealed to the Hebrew right there when he talked about how the Hebrew was to be translated there in his debate with David Preston. And so therefore I could go into that. So furthermore, the word goyim is translated as peoples in other places. So the statement multitude of nations can be translated as related to the people groups. And we know that Ephraim grew in population when others declined at other times. So another thing he goes into is Deuteronomy 34, where it talks about the land, where Moses being able to see the land, but it doesn't necessarily say the land is given at that point, or seeing the land, and not necessarily all the land that Moses sees is all the land that was promised to Abraham. And then we'll deal with the issues of the fulfillment in Joshua, but Joshua 13 clearly says they didn't drive out the inhabitants. Same thing with Judges and all of that. I'm going to go into an analogy next time I talk about this to clarify this, but basically the idea is concerning the promise. If you're faithful to parts of the promise, then you can be commended for that, because even though the larger promise is part of it, like paying for a 4-year college thing and you just paid for the first thing for my tuition, I could say you kept your promise, but that 1 year is within the larger promise. So we'll talk about that more. God bless.
Okay, Charles, thank you very much